Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me for this video, which is going to be a look at some of the photos I took while we were in Universal Studios in November last year. It's a bit of a highlight of some of my favourite spots and some little things I found that I thought you might like to know about. The photos in this video will jump around a little bit because they were taken over 3 days as we travelled between Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure. Islands of Adventure is going to be a separate video, so look out for that one coming soon. So instead of the order that we took them in, I've decided to put them in a bit of an order that you'd walk around them in the parks. So we're going to start with the front of the park and work our way down to the Harry Potter sections. Being there in late November, we got to enjoy most of the Christmas decorations without any of the Christmas crowds. I really enjoyed walking through the Production Central, New York and San Francisco zones. It's just for the sake of this video I didn't find a whole lot of our photos were worth sharing with you. There could also be my Harry Potter centric nature that wants to rush us all over there right now. This photo is actually a bit of a jump in perspective from where we just were, as this is the little bridge leading from World Expo into the Wizarding World London section. As a Harry Potter fan in Universal Studios, I have found the London area to be the calmest, especially compared to the crowd crush that can happen in Diagon Alley. So if you're looking for a place to have a nice relaxing wander around but still be fully immersed in the Harry Potter world, my recommendation would be to head to London. This is the one time you'll have a bit of a crowd and have to line up to be able to have your photo taken and a bit of an interaction with a night bus conductor and the Shrunken Head. I think Creature in the Window is getting to be one of those not so secrets anymore, but here's Mum being game enough to disturb him. This sign for the Leaky Cauldron is the first time in this video, but I'm sure not the last, that I'll ask you to please remember to look up. So now making our way through the brick wall into Diagon Alley. This one obviously required my mum to be with me to be the patient photographer while we waited for the archway to be empty, which we have found happens if it's a slightly quieter day. We're going to start by making our way up the main street of Diagon Alley. And this is where I also remind you to take the time to really look in the windows. Starting on our right is the Quality Quidditch Supplies shop, which is actually a shop you can go into. Right beside it and heading inside is Weasley's Wizard Wheezers, and definitely make sure you look up in here. Jumping across the side alley and we get to the Daily Prophet. Now another not so secret is that if you stand right in front you can hear people inside working. From approximately the same vantage point, we're looking at the tops of the buildings from across the street. And reminder number 2 to please look up. The details they put into the buildings and these amazing signs are things you do not want to miss. Moving up to Ollivander's wand shop, which you can actually go into and buy your own wand. And for the patience shot out the front to get no one else in front of the shop. Once again zigzagging onto the other side and we have Shutter Buttons, which is another store you can go into. But make sure you check out the front windows. Up to the Mr. Molepepper's Apothecary facade, and this is the first of the kind of creepy looking windows. This is the same top of the shops from earlier, but this time we're standing in front of Fortescue's Ice Creamery. This part of the facade just always makes me think this is how Diagon Alley should be, with just how crammed in they can manage to make everybody. Turning the other way, and we make it to Gringotts Bank, and the escaping fire-breathing dragon. Now the trick with this guy is that he always makes just a little bit of noise right before he breathes fire. So you have less than a minute to prepare your phone or your ears. When you're looking at Gringotts, just to the left is a staircase, all of which are facades, but it is a great place to find yourself a shady spot out of the crowds, and especially pleasant if you brought a Fortescue's ice cream with you. This was also a great place to get a vantage point on the dragon that you don't see very often. Moving further to the left of Gringotts is the Magical Menagerie. And make sure you go down the little hallway on the side to visit the giant snake. Now don't go rapping on the glass, if you wait a couple of minutes it will move for you. The upstairs facades, including the Wizarding Wireless Network, which is above the bathrooms, just down from the Magical Menagerie. This is an interactive wand point located outside the bathrooms, and while you're waiting for the rest of your party, it's quite amusing to watch people playing in the water. And because you're in the Wizarding World, even as you're leaving the bathrooms, you've got to have a good view. So starting with Florian Fortescue's, you've got a place to buy butterbeer, and then heading down into Borgin and Burke's in Knockturn Alley. Knockturn Alley is another great place to seek refuge from the heat and also some of the crowds. There is some fantastic theming dotted around Knockturn Alley, including this window of potions and venoms, so make sure you have a good snoop around when you're down here. Borgin and Burke's is the one shop in Knockturn Alley that you can actually step foot in, and is most definitely worth a look around. Not just for the dark arts related merchandise, but also the dark arts theming, and the copious amounts of cobwebs and dust that the decorating team have added. Exiting Knockturn Alley in this direction, you'll come out directly across from the second street of Diagon Alley, which runs up the side of Weasley's Wizard Wheezers, and takes you past this very charming window facade. Because who doesn't love a good jelly eel with mashed onions? The first major thing of note heading in this direction is the Owl Post shop. And if you stand here for just a couple of minutes and look up, you will see that a couple of owls in their roosts actually move. New since our visit 2 years ago was the Globus Mundi travel shop, and I had a great time reading all their adverts in the front window. And I thought the wall of international clocks was just fantastic. The sort of middle section of this street tends to be nice and quiet unless it's showtime on the stage, which makes this a great place to just sort of poke around, get a little bit of the shade, and just look at some of the fantastic theming, because most of the things on this side are facades. Just up from the stage is the Gringotts Money Exchange, and I mean, how could you not buy a goblin from a goblin? Make sure you have a really good look around this Eternals refreshment stand. These cement look creatures are just amazing in detail, and there are 6 different ones. And this basically brings us back to the top of the main street of Diagon Alley, and looking at the right side of our dragon. This is the beautifully detailed grand room that you first walk into for the Escape from Gringotts ride, complete with multiple humongous chandeliers. And as you walk through, you get to see it from multiple vantage points. This was probably the spot where I felt the most like I was in one of the movies. And please remember that even if you're unable or choose not to ride the ride, you are still able to go in and have a look at all of this. You just follow the line through and you leave just before you enter a ride car. But that does mean that you have to stick with the line to be able to get out. So I recommend doing this when there is an extremely short wait time. Wiseacres Wizarding Equipment is my favourite shop for roofline theming. Back down to the bottom of Diagon Alley, and we're into the Leaky Cauldron for lunch. In here, much like everywhere else, is a place that I really like to look up and appreciate all of the details. For our first lunch, we got the bread bowl stew and the sausages, as well as a little tub of potted cream that you can see under the sausages. I had been really looking forward to the potted cream because it's butterbeer flavoured, but unfortunately there was a synthetic note in there for me that I just didn't enjoy. I do, however, absolutely love their main meals, and this is my favourite of the 2 Wizarding World restaurants. And one of the reasons we chose to come here when we did is so that I could finally try the hot butterbeer. Now please don't hate me, but this is actually the only flavour of drinkable butterbeer that I actually enjoy. And for our second lunch here, I once again got the delicious stew, but this time without the bread bowl, as I have a very mild gluten intolerance, and once I explained this to the person we were ordering with, they were more than happy to accommodate my request. And Mum picked up the fish and chips, which she really enjoyed. And for our drinks this lunch, we really went overboard for the 2 of us. So once again, while I could, I picked up another hot butterbeer. And my favourite drink at the Leaky Cauldron is the tongue-twisting lemonade, and it tastes like a mix between obviously real lemons because they're in there, and sort of a lemon flavoured Skittle, which is strange but absolutely enjoyable, especially if you don't mind having your face pucker just a little bit. We also tried pumpkin juice for the first time, which I found palatable, but again, not my favourite. Mum did really enjoy it, and it's just another example of how polarising the Wizarding World can be for 2 people. We usually agree quite a lot, but drinks here divide the 2 of us like no tomorrow, because that fishy green ale thing right at the front there is all hers every time. I do not want a bar of it. And here we are, disappearing through the wall between platforms 9 and 10. And this does require, again, the patience of a photographer. Although this time we enlisted the help of another tourist. If you can manage to not get completely distracted by the Hogwarts Express, right here at the beginning of the line, there's Harry Potter's trunk with Hedwig sitting in her cage. And occasionally, she will swivel her head to look in the other direction. And the reason we're all so distracted? The Hogwarts Express. Which obviously took us over to Hogsmeade. And since that's a separate video, we're going to double back to Diagon Alley and have a look at some of my favourite photos from as the sun was starting to set, which is my favourite time to take photos, especially with the Christmas lights out, because you can see the lights and still see all the details. This is beside the far entrance to Knockturn Alley, and the lights are one of the magic wand points, but I just waited for someone else to turn them on. This was again taken from that spot on the bridge that I liked, heading up towards Men in Black. Taking a bit of a time and location jump, and I couldn't help but take this picture of the way the Gringotts Dragon sticks out above the San Francisco skyline. We're standing at the top of Hollywood Boulevard, right out the front of Mel's Diner, which was our viewing spot for the Macy's Christmas Parade. We had performers with many different apparatus, including these really beautiful looking reindeer, and then stepping up to these ladies on stilts and what looked to be segways in the background. It's a fantastic spot to view from because it's just across the way from the backstage gates, so you actually get to see it as it comes out and as it's heading away. There were different themed dancing groups, as well as the crews for the balloons, and even the cast members that were accompanying the floats to make sure nothing happened. And then of course there was the character-laden floats themselves. So we had Groot with the girls, and naturally Minions got a look in a few times on their own. The Minion float had so much going on that it took you the whole time it was going past just to try and see everything, and I probably still missed a lot. The Shrek float has Shrek and Fiona, as well as an animatronic style baby in her arms and the dragon on top, as well as Pinocchio right on the front, and who knows what else I didn't actually get to see properly. On top of the Universal theming was some really beautiful Christmas floats. And as you would expect, these did not skimp on the details either. For our viewing of the nighttime show's cinematic spectacular, we chose a spot on the grass leaning against the fence, and we were back just a little from the front edge, but I felt we were slightly more elevated and we ended up with a better view. And for the spectacular itself, well, it definitely lived up to its name. And as a Harry Potter fan, I obviously would have been happier if it featured more heavily. But as a whole, it was absolutely amazing. And I really appreciated that with the use of technology, fireworks were able to be used as a feature, not as the main event. As is usual for me at Universal Studios, come the end of the night, I'm still not ready to leave. So as the crowd started to head for the exit, I had another walk up along the water's edge. I loved the neon glow of the San Francisco waterfront, but naturally my favourite was coming up to London. And this was probably the one thing I didn't know to expect and turned out to be one of my absolute favourite moments. And then we joined the dwindling crowds to head back out. And who can blame us but to have one more stop and one final pose? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What has been the most perfect and maybe accidental thing that's happened to you in Universal Studios? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.